touching our minds away from all the chores and problems and troubles that surround us. And this morning we come before you, seeking your divine grace, your divine mercy, and your divine pardon for our shortfalls and our iniquities. We seek your forgiveness, that you cleanse us from all our unrighteousness, so that this morning we are worthy to call upon you, so that you can face us this morning with your power and your might and your glory to hear our prayers. Mighty God, bless us. Bless the Speaker. Bless the Prime Minister. Bless the opposition leader. And bless all the leaders who are present here this morning. Grant us your peace and grant us your love, that as we go through the business of this house, mighty God, may your will be done. And Lord, as we all unite in the prayer that Jesus taught us, mighty God, may you help us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Honourable members, I have to inform the Parliament of the deaths of Mr. Ben Alan Micah on 16 March 2022, a former member for the TVWAN Open Electorate in the 5th National Parliament from 1992 to 1997, and re-elected to the same seat in the 9th National Parliament from 2012 to 2017. During those terms as Member of Parliament, he served as a member of the Appointments Committee, Standing Orders Committee, and Chairman of the Public Works Committee, and Minister for Public Enterprise and State. He also served as Chairman of the Constitutional Commission. B. Mr. Gerard Biona Motawia, on 6 March 2022, a former member for the Kiriwina-Goodina Open Electorate in the 3rd National Parliament from 1982 to 1987, 4th National Parliament from 1987 to 1992, and 5th National Parliament from 1992 to 1997. During those terms as Member of Parliament, he served as member of the National Parliament Committee, Assistant Speaker of the National Parliament, member of the Constitutional Laws and Acts Committee, Appointments Committee, Minister for Culture and Tourism, Minister for Health, and Minister for Culture and Tourism again in October 1991. As a mark of respect to the memory of the late honourable gentleman, I invite all honourable members to rise in their places. I thank the Parliament. All members, I wish to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery of ward members of the Sumcar district. On behalf of the Parliament, I extend to the visitors a warm welcome to the National Parliament. Mr. Clark. Petitions? Notices? Mr. Clark.
Notice. The Minister for Treasury gives notice that he shall present a bill for an act to amend the Income Tax Act 1959.
Question. Inoga Toksawe Blongan, for 5 minutes. Honorable Governor Blong, Northern Province.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, all people of Northern Province. Question blow me without notice, me go Prime Minister. It's a question in relation to current situation Ukraine, Russia, where invasion Ukraine even come up. Because Russia is one of the major energy producing nation in the world, this situation will affect him entire world or global economy. Papua New Guinea too suppose you go to social media or even mainstream media, but you read also plenty man Mary only start complain rise in prices of common household goods, even services too. So question for me go to Prime Minister Morrison. Prime Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, one of the steps by this government to kiss him, try and mitigate him, or try and straight him heavy, where price increase he work come up because this conflict he work come up Russia and Ukraine. Enough and can talk so that all people can harem whether this government he got some strategy or no got assist addressing this issue price rise all get the prices common household goods inside Papua New Guinea. Thank you, true.
Honorable Prime Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Governor Blong, Oro Province, or Northern Province, ask him this good and important question, as he always does, on matters that is important for our country. So this question is very important and timely. Let me give a response in this manner. Government, as responsible as we are very much cognizant to the prevalent environment that we are living in, especially inflation that will be caused by the increase in the oil and gas prices. And so government malalo mipla been making work underneath good work long treasurer, and we continue to steer him ship long economy living in these tough times. That's the reason why plenty Yumik is in pay on time. A few years back we were getting our pays a little bit behind. Today pays are being paid on time. DSIP, PSIP programs are being rolled on time. Government programs are keep on running because treasurer is deep at work faithfully and in an astute manner up there in the treasury office. Treasurer na team blogger la treasury slip only bring him some measure companies along cabinet, and cabinet approving some measures for us to bring to parliament very soon. We may miss this parliament session, but definitely in the last parliament sitting of the year of this term in April, treasurer's papers will come before us to make some adjustments to our budget papers to ensure whatever treasurer is bringing has the support of law and support of parliament. There's a combination of measures that treasurer brought into cabinet, and cabinet has given approval of. I think treasurer will release a full statement in due course once the paper has been cleared off from my desk. But one of mipla look in simple terms, treasurer ikara paper come to look him if mipla could slash him GST. If mipla could bring him GST come down the click, whether at a flat line GST reduction and the Treasury has recommended for a drop in 2% GST on a flat line, or a targeted 0% GST on specific common household items, including fuel and including things like rice, flour, tin fish, cooking oil. So a combination of measures in the current cabinet and cabinet approving finish. You may looking at a flat line reduction of GST by 2%, bringing GST come down to 8%, or you may have him a targeted approach where you may targeting more sectors where you may really burdensome to our people, and you may like more people, especially the ordinary consumers in our economy. The people who are consumers who line up in our retail shops, consumers who line up in our fuel service stations to pay lesser to address the inflation that is caused by the war in Ukraine and that war induced rise in fuel price. So I'll bring this answer come to close and clearer. Treasury bringing paper companies to the cabinet either 2% reduce in GST or a targeted reduction in completely zero GST on common goods in our country. And this, in my view, would be the first time any treasurer or any government for that matter has made an attempt to look at GST. We're getting a little bit of a technical queries from IRC. They're saying that to adjust for reduction in GST may not be feasible ASAP. It may take time to adjust, and implementation may come 2 or 3 months down the line. That is something that the Treasurer and his team are working on with IRC. But in the meantime, the Treasury staff are working with ICCC to ensure there is no extra increase in prices of common goods, and the price of common goods can be kept. And Treasurer is also looking at levy reduction in most of our common goods, especially fuel. At the fuel buzzer, these combinations have been looked on by the Treasurer, slashing of GST, whether a flatline slash or a targeted slash, as well as looking at levy reduction. And these announcements will be made very, very soon when the process is complete, especially when Treasury is now trying to model. If there is a drop, if a reduction in GST, what is the cost of that GST drop on the economy or in our 2022 budget? From our modeling thus far, if 2% of GST is reduced from everyday consumers and our economy, our budget will be affected by 600 to 700 million kina. Now, you may ask where we will fill in the gap. The increase in revenue from good oil prices and good gold price is the area we look into fill in the gap. Last year when we went to budget, or when we came to this parliament for budget approval, our oil price was placed at $60 a barrel. Today oil price is at around $100 a barrel. We're modeling on an average of $80 a barrel, and that little margin increase, we want to supplement or fill in the gap in which Treasurer is recommending to remove 2% GST off from our consumers in our country. This may be the first time any government or any treasurer has attempted to alleviate the burden directly with our people instead of assisting service providers or assisting companies who are saving our economy. We want to make sure by government policy the consumers, the spenders, are being assisted in as far as putting a little bit of kinamo in the pocket when they have reduced GST or reduced levy on the consumables that is everyday need in our country. So, Mr. Speaker, let me summarize by saying, good question. Treasurer has not been sleeping. He's been at work. Cabinet has already approved this combination of measures that should give a little bit of help to our consumers in our country to peg against the inflation that is caused by the rise in oil price or gas price associated with the war in Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We have a supplementary. Honourable Governor.
Mr. Speaker, my supplementary question to the Prime Minister in this regard is regarding Napa Napa oil refinery. Prime Minister knows, everybody knows, one of the factors contributing to inflation or cost of everything going up is fuel as a result of this war in Ukraine. And in this respect, my understanding is that Napa, they have, the refinery has a capacity to supply all the fuel we need in PNG and of course also in the Pacific. But they have a problem accessing crude oil. And the crude oil they access, half of it or maybe 3/4 come from a market in Singapore. And to get that crude oil, of course, they need access to Forex. So my understanding is that Napa Oil Refinery have problem accessing Forex in order to purchase crude oil from Singapore. So my question is government working with Napa Oil Refinery to get more crude oil from Kutubu to supplement if there is any shortfall, or is there a strategy that we can come up with to get crude oil internally, or otherwise get cheaper crude oil in the international market, like get it from other countries like Venezuela, for example? You know, but we need a strategy. So that's basically my question to the Prime Minister, because it's the price of oil that is, you know, boosting inflation, getting price of all the goods and services to go high. So we need a strategy to fix that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Prime Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note the importance of the supplementary question that the Governor of NCD has raised. As I did make mention earlier, in respect to fuel and fuel supplies in our country, we're looking at removing excise or levy on those fuels. So in this time, it is not passed to the consumers or customers. But in the issue of Kutubu crude, as we know, Kutubu crude has contracts to it. It's being exported at the moment. This is something we're looking at going forward into the future. That is why this government has always been aggressive in the domestic market obligation side of gas for our country, so that we move into the space of downstream. And downstream processing in our country is something that we have overlooked for many, many years. Now, we push on long, kisi more long or gas lumi, now lumi, long ensuring that you make a downstream processing law. This plus something into the future. We're not dependent too much, and especially essential items like fuel. We're not dependent so much on the external forces of market, where price rise, and we also having price rise in our domestic economy. So going forward, this is something we're looking at, consistent with our downstream processing focus, and our increased push to secure more gas. As we've seen, we are securing more gas in Penang for downstream space. That is consistent with the drive. But the immediate production in Kutubu is something we're looking at to ensure that if there are any excess, and they could Prima could pick up from Kutubu and process in country, we're trying to match that with the removal of excise as well as levy to ensure price of fuel is not skyrocketing, but stabilizing, if not come back to where it was before the Ukraine crisis was. Your question, Mr. Speaker, on the Forex excess. Forex excess, I think at this point in time, Bank of PNG has more foreign reserve in our bank than it has ever had in the last 10 years, so to speak. Today we got 10 billion kina plus, or equivalent US dollar, about $3 billion of US sitting in our foreign reserve. The important and big consumers or customers like Puma and those who need Forex, in my view, they should have easy access now, or better access to US dollar for their purchase also than it was before. I will get to look at it. If Puma is struggling, then I'll get the treasurer and his team to assist them, so that in this tough time, we don't have a queue, or we don't have shortage of fuels in our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We have another supplementary. Honourable Governor, what's the supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary is again in relation to the increase of price of goods as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. This is particularly in relation to the large-scale agriculture sector in our country. Russia and Ukraine are both major producers of fertilizer, And as a result of the war, the price of fertilizer has increased from about 2,500 kina a ton to 6,000 kina a ton. And whilst we are looking at relief for our ordinary citizens on the street, I wonder if there could be some consideration given to the agriculture sector, particularly palm oil, and of course our fledgling rice industry. They both depend heavily on imported fertilizers, and this almost tripling of prices is going to affect them. I understand that we've introduced a raft of levies and duties on the agriculture sector this year, and perhaps the Treasurer could take note, and Prime Minister, if Cabinet can take a look at giving some relief to the large-scale agriculture sector as a result of these fertilizer increases. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Governor for ECPIC for asking this supplementary again. This recommendations that is considerable and doable by any measure, especially in this time when we're trying to ensure our country's production is maintained and the cost of doing business is stabilized, if not the effect minimized. So those considerations are worthy, and the Treasurer will certainly take them on board. Thank you very much.
Honourable Member for Sumcar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for recognizing the good people of Sumcar. Mr. Speaker, my question without notice is directed to the Minister for Finance. But before I ask the Minister this question, I would also take the cue behalf of the good people of Sumcar and my family. We also pass our condolence message to the good people of Goilala and also Pangupati for this great quilla of Pangupati, the late Honorable William Sam. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people of Sumcar, I would like to congratulate the 7 districts that were split yesterday. Thank you. Congratulations to those districts that you will have additional funds to help the people in terms of service delivery. I think, Mr. Speaker, I think most of the districts, they also in that same category. But just bringing it to the attention of Prime Minister and also the Electoral Boundary Commission, behalf of my people from Sumcar, it is important that we update the census so that if we are basing our boundary splits depending on population, I will assure this Parliament that Kaka Highland alone, we have a population around 100,000 or even 110,000. If I sum this number of Kaka Island plus Bagbag Island and Sumgilba, Sumcar alone will reach around 150,000. So if we are splitting the boundaries in terms of population, I believe so Sumcar is in that category as well. So me bringing to attention the Prime Minister and Electoral Boundary Commission as well. My question to the Minister for Finance is, Minister, we are approaching the elections, and some of our budgets has been given to the districts and provinces. We're very late towards the elections, and I thank the Prime Minister and the government that this morning he announced that we'll receive a DSIP by this Parliament. So my question is, Minister, we will be sitting for those meetings, and those meeting resolutions will be late. Will be late going into elections. The REITs will be open 4 weeks' time. Suppose people sit down this meeting, one requirement blow bank kami also. In order for them to process those meeting resolutions, they need our Form 11. And the members of the Parliament will also sign on Form 11, so that those budgets will be, those monies will be paid. So I just need the confirmation that even me blogo inshallah reach, and due to the issue law, IFMS system, now all got a payment and delay. Without Form 11, the finance will continue to process those funds or not. Lot of people are going to the election. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Treasurer? Mr. Finance?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I want to thank the good member for Sumka for an important question. I think let me answer the question this way. I believe when the writ issued, the Ombudsman Commission will step in to freeze our accounts, but this is not so much so to in any way stop the progress of any ongoing contractual programs and projects in our districts or provinces for that matter. The representatives of the Ombudsman Commission have visited us, and for those of us who were part and parcel of the engagement with them, I believe just a few or a couple of months ago, in that they advised that contractual projects and programs will continue, but that progressive payments will be made available to the Ombudsman Commission and can be done online. So by their clearances, the payments can be made. This is so as to protecting you and me and all of us against any allegations or issues in terms of us having to be seen to be using public money to have an edge in our elections, and also to ensuring that we are protected from unnecessary election petitions, etc. So, MLO Disla side, insofar as Form 11s are concerned, I think that is indeed a challenging question. I think we will be all in the elections. At the present time, Form 11s are in administrative arrangements. This is just to ensuring that it gives more visibility to accountability and transparency in approaches to the districts having to raise checks, and those checks are in accordance with the resolutions of the DDAs, etc. So I will have to seek some advice from my department as to the importance and the significance of Form 11, especially after the writs are issued and we are geared in the elections. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member of Yangaru.
Right this morning to ask a question without notice to the Minister of National Planning. Kami talk patient so that all people know isipik masarim na wasipik masarim sila question. Mr. Speaker, over 2.5 years ago, when I was still Minister of National Planning, we signed a financing agreement to bring on board the European Union 350 million rural intervention program to improve the livelihoods of the people of East and West Pacific. Under that program, which is the biggest undertaking by European Union in the history in the region, they want to implement programs in 5 sectors: microfinance, fisheries, cocoa, vanilla, and of course build rural roads and improve rural roads. Mr. Speaker, it is now 2.5 years basically after the signing of the agreement. European Union engaged the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to implement the program. It's been going on 2.5 years. And I must inform this country not one road has been built in the 2 Pacific provinces. Nogat Road, less than 200,000 seedlings of cocoa has been distributed. Supplementary farmer train come up with fisheries and cocoa, but up to now it's an absolute failure. It's important Parliament knows because this is an important aid program for the country.
Honorable Member Bloyanguru, are you asking a question or are you making a statement here?
So now I'm asking more question me Minister of National Planning. Mr. Speaker, my questions are as follows. Minister of National Planning, as Minister responsible for this program as the National Authorizing Officer, what are the targets set by you and your department as the Public Guinea government with EU and FAO to be achieved at the end of the 5-year program when the 350 million is used? Question number 2, you shall all target, like, for example, how much million cocoa seedlings will be distributed to farmers? Which roads are going to be built in the 5 years? Do you have those targets and information or not? You saw it too or not as minister responsible? Because nothing's happening. Number 2, Minister supposed Nogat, what are you going to do to rescue this program? Can you inform our people and the people of Papua New Guinea whether you be calling one black crisis meeting immediately? Calling the leaders of both civic provinces, US minister responsible, European Union, you come sit down, all the other partners involved in the program. Can we thrash it out and see how we can fix this and deliver this program and have impact in the next 2.5 years left so they can leave behind sustainable development and benefits to the country as a result of using this 350 million kina of donor funds from the European Union. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of National Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Law. A very good question by former Minister of National Planning and Member Bloyanguru Sausia. Mr. Speaker, the program one, as he stated in his question, and I appreciate some of the statements he made, in particular the two questions that he made. One, Prime Minister, when the government, this government came into office, under his leadership as minister, he signed off on the program, which is now called the STRAIGHT program. STRAIGHT for the Support to Rural Entrepreneurship, Investment and Trade program. And as he mentioned in his questions, one, the program was European grant funding, which was particularly to look at carrying out programs, especially agriculture, in the two provinces, in the East Sepik and West Sepik provinces. Mr. Speaker, since that program was started, there was an inception phase, which was supposed to be 12 months. And when the program took off, and as he rightly stated, we're into the second year of the program now. Because of few issues raised by members from East and West Sepik, my department was tasked to look at a quick appraisal on the program itself and how it was being implemented. I think the leading agency leading the program in this program was FAO. Now there are a couple of issues that it was explored all looking time when the team was done the appraisal last year. And I'd like to just bring those issues to his attention, and through you, Mr. Speaker, I think he will appreciate some of the issues that we had in trying to carry out this program. Number one, Mr. Speaker, when we signed the program and it was about to be implemented, when my department checked on why the implementation was slow, one was that COVID lockdowns. Now when COVID-19 came about, we had certain lockdowns that the government imposed on flights coming in and going out. At the same time, UN also, a couple of those agencies that are dealing with those separate programs are also doing their lockdowns. And when a couple of those lockdowns happened, you can understand the movements of people, taking out people working in and out. The movement of those staff could not happen, thus delaying some months into the program. Number two, there was supposed to be a baseline survey that was supposed to be done once that program was signed off. To this date, that baseline survey was not completed. And that has been some of the major impediments to fully employing and finishing this program. The other one, Mr. Speaker, was that when our officers went to investigate and looking at one delay implementation of the program, one, Mr. Speaker, some officer on ground In some of those districts that were happening, like Nuku, Rekiki, Maprik, Yanguru Sausia, those programs where officers were staffed to filling presence floor or straight officers on the ground. Thus, we needed more collaboration or synergy between the funding agency and the sub-national levels, from provincial governments to district governments as well. So this line has been stopped so that I'm no fast-tracking in terms of the baseline studies and that inception period, 1 year, which was supposed to make him. Mr. Speaker, at the same time, in those district headquarters in those two particular provinces, this law agencies were carrying out those separate programs like FAO going so long agriculture, now UNDP and ARPLA were engaged in said long financial inclusion and financial training, the energy sector as well. Also, goes no got presence flow. All ARPLA officers on the ground, they needed more a more tangible partnership, as in our Olba Workbung want them. So our department through national planning has tried to engage with United Nations, and at the same time trying to engage with, I think I had a short conversation with Governor Blong ECPIC, and I hope to meet Governor Blong WCPIC as to how we can address those issues that are causing the delay in the implementation of this program. So as to the targets, Mr. Speaker, the targets that we have are the targets that a program that was set out for. But as to the delay blow baseline survey, that has not been completed, and I hope that we can complete that quickly as to give us the baseline targets. Number 2 question, Blong M, what is the course of action? Number 1, last year, November, Mipla commissioning Mompla quick appraisal, and officers were sent to investigate those 2 provinces where the programs were happening. And thus, the report has come back to us at the department, and we hope that in this coming months we can engage with those districts that are programs that are happening and the provincial governments as well, so to create the synergies so that we can implement. And with our development partner as well, the United Nations and the European Development Fund that has granted this program as well. So I'll prioritize this program, and some of these issues have been outside of what the government can control, which is COVID-19 and the synergy between implementing this program. So some that we can control, which is getting the provincial governments and the district together, we will address after this appraisal team has done its work in the last months or so. So me appreciating question, and I hope to meet with him and the leaders from East and West Pacific so that we can carry out these massive programs that the people of, through the European Development Fund has been assisting us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member Lopomio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question Blomi Golong, hardworking Minister of Health. Before me asking question Blomi me Salim people talk sorry on behalf of my people, on the relatives, families, people of Goilala, Central Province, and the member of this Parliament, people of Papua New Guinea, on the passing of one of our hardworking members and member, the minister who recently passed away, William Sam. We thank the Lord for his life and his service to our people. My question is regard to COVID in the country. To date, total cases for COVID stands at around 41,000. Deaths around 639. That's the latest data. The questions are, firstly, can the minister say today on this floor, is COVID still a threat to the country or not? Secondly, what is the government position or plan where you see the election coming up? What is the government plan today with regard to COVID or any election, during the election period? Thirdly, what's the government position on the national, the COVID center? Will the government continue to keep the COVID center or not? Should you now see the need to disband the COVID center and allow the police commissioner to concentrate on the election now? And thirdly, fourthly, recently during Joint Parliamentary Committee on Public Sector Reform and Public Accounts Committee, there was we know that there is a procurement that is still held at the NPC for the last 8 months on the medical supplies. Is the minister aware of this delay by NPC to allow the contract to go through or not? If you know, what is the department doing about this? Because we see the need for health. I mean, the medical supplies to be transported to many of our health facilities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the good member for Pomio for his series of questions. Firstly, the question on COVID. COVID is still very much a threat in our country. The government has put policy in place to ensure that we carry on with life. So the new passing will now go into a new way of living, that we live with the knowledge that COVID-19 is within our country. The isolation centers will still be open. We have different variants and mutations that continue to enrage some of the places in our world. So we have to be ready to ensure that it doesn't come into our country. The NCC, the National COVID Center, it will be transitioning into a public health safety authority from what it is now, and the controller's position will go back into a public health and safety position. With the NPC, I don't control the NPC, but my secretary has been in contact with NPC to ensure that the procurement process is followed. I can't speak on behalf of NPC, but I've been told that the NPC are going through the legal programs to ensure that the procurement process is followed, and they come out with an answer. With that, I thank the member for Pomio for his questions. Thank you.
Honorable Governor of New Britain.
Mr. Speaker, Lok Sabha all people belong in New Britain. Mr. Speaker, question belum minus tablo notice paper. Na milaki maskim belong good belong minister belong Lands Department. Speaker, you sabi long province below me, no unrenewable resources, and my province depends on agriculture. When you're talking about agriculture, you're talking about land. Yesterday, Miharim, colleague governor belong Oro province, he raised a lot of important questions and issues regarding the climate change, forestry, etc., etc. Question from me, Colosseum. In my province, there is illegal operation of logging taking place. Now, this is involving Minister Yusawe Pinis. I believe the Catholic Church, you have had some meetings with them. I believe it's about 4 times we have sat down with them, with the bishop and administration, that the problem on Put plantation, the big problem is belong sa Put plantation. At this point in time, there is a legal operation taking place by a company known as Pacific Regional Development Limited. Ground where you walk along into now, that was acquired illegally by this developer through a land group company, a land group. Now, Papa used to be called on the Sala clan, and maybe in the Dai Peninsula last year. Now, the current operation now, the Sala logging operation, illegally on Put plantation. Put plantation, Speaker, it consists of about 19,000 hectares of land. It's quite a big portion of land. My province needs this land. Population of East Britain is growing very fast, especially the Gazelle Peninsula. Today we're having a problem with the climate changes, king tides coming up, and people have problems through Lamipala. So the provincial government is looking for land to resettle the people of Duke of York, Ralwan LLG, and Watermelon. And we are looking at this portion of land, consists of 5 portions in Put. Some years back, the church was trying to give the land to the provincial government of East Britain for resettlement. But government at the time been carried out. I'm not sure why. But then, AAA companies, all money is in the Salagiraon, they legally transferred the 5 titles along the Sala company or the Sala land group.
Honorable Governor, you like asking question or you like story?
Yes, it's a very important question for my people. Now, I'd like him, President, let me go down, only to find out that the 5 title was illegally transferred to the clan. Question belum mi sot pelata sol minister. Question belum mi kalau sem. Why, after through court cases involving the church and the land department, na court find out finish all of them, yes, the land was illegally transferred to this clan. Court decision has been made. Now, when time through, but you transfer him the title, he go down long church, that is the church of the Catholic Church of Rabaul. And question blame you all say, when time through, you are aware of this, department has been sitting on it for how many years now? So that's my question. Thank you, Speaker.
Honourable Minister of Ground.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Governor of Eastern Britain, asking a very important question. Yes, I am aware of the situation on Put. And as you quite rightfully pointed out, I have personally taken charge of the situation, and we have been discussing with the bishop and the relevant church agency and the representatives from the Catholic Church, regarding this Put ground. I mean, no legal issue and big play issue because he got some fraudulent activity before my time, where online go sim ILG, antablo ground blow, freehold land title blow Catholic Church. So time go sim ILG antablo disla, all purported Papa ground longam, all been one claimant small one original Papa ground. Now sim title antablo title. So title blow disla ILG title le, emol sim antablo freehold ground block Catholic Church. Freehold land cannot be transferred or administered anyway through transfer without the owners. It is held in perpetuity, MOSM ground block Catholic Church for the rest of its life. And I know that the Catholic Church wants to sit down with the provincial government. They have arrangements that the Catholic Church will transfer portions of that land to the provincial government to do exactly as you said, the resettlement of a lot of people that in over-congested areas in Eastern Britain. So, Mr. Speaker, MIPLA Disla rectify these issues, like countless others. There is another situation, Antablo Keravat, that had the same thing, where you got online, all been trying to ILG, Antablo Ground, University, Vudal, Antaplo, Kerevat House Karabus, Antaplo, all the state institutions, Antaplo, Kerevat. Same, exact same process. Well, look, ILG, but we, fortunately, in my term, I read my papers, so me cancel him this ILG, what I'm request belong. So back to that situation, we are working on it. Our department's working on it, and we have also I assured you that the directors that were responsible for this under the ILG division have been terminated by my secretary over issues like this that have resulted in duplication of titles. So we are working on it, and hopefully we should have some rectification of those problems before I leave office. It is very, very soon, I can assure you, my good governor. And the Catholic Church representatives are calling me and meeting with me daily or weekly. Thank you.
Honourable Governor of Southern Highlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My series of questions is directed to the Minister for State Enterprise, but unfortunately he is not in, so the Prime Minister can answer this. Before my series of questions, Mr. Speaker, I want to also represent the people of Southern Highlands to convey our condolence to the people of Guelala and to the Pangu Party and to the immediate relatives of late Honorable William Sant, Minister for Commerce. He was a great leader, and for Guelala, in my view, and the short time that I have got to know him, he has raised the level of Guelala in a very unprecedented way in terms of leadership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Going back to my series of questions, this plan in relation to me talk present so that all people can have him in relation to newspaper report long last day, where he walk him big plus statement long pages of Motukoya Wharf inside law NCD. Newspaper and me report also value general was forced to increase the valuation of that particular port facilities from 400 million to 700 million. So, Mr. Speaker, we like asking Prime Minister through you, display me true or not. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, 300 million AM go where? Number 3 question. In a government penny mat, some company na private company operate long Motukoya wharf facilities. How all kisim title now all this facilities long this wharf benefit through long sample this money or no God. I think the people of Papua New Guinea through this parliament we need to know this. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, although we are going for elections, but in the interest of public policy and for the good of this nation, 700 million and plenty of money, so we need to table a report on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Prime Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank you, Lord Governor of the Southern Highlands, Lord, ask him one important question. This transaction happened in the last parliament. Ministers, so I clear what happened inside the cabinet room, but maybe lines of ministers at the time we know exactly what happened in cabinet room. However, the matter is now under a commission of inquiry. This transaction, time you may come up on board, will feel the people feel that you may need a review. And one kind of UBS, na Motukoya Airport. Let me start on the inquiry. So, me like Mr. Speaker, through you, ask him Governor law, respecting process law inquiry law complete. It's over $1 billion kina transaction that took place in a port that some of us felt at the time the value was not at 700 million kina, and for the value general to come out and said that he was forced. I think this is all part of the process of the inquiry that is taking place. So allow the process of inquiry to complete its course. And as the process is complete, we'll table the report on the floor of Parliament and for appropriate actions to take course. While speaking on the inquiry, I think the UBS report is coming around to a closer very soon. Before this Parliament rises, the Parliament will have a benefit of the report for us to see fully what the transactions that took place in UBS. And so we initiated 2 inquiries. The UBS inquiry that is almost complete now, but the port inquiry is still going on for us to establish the real cause of what happened. Whether it was a value for money transaction and all the finer details beyond what took place, the inquiry that is taking place will reveal to us fully. And at that point in time, I could be in a better place to answer this point in time because we've sanctioned the inquiry. I cannot preempt what is taking place. Witness to the inquiry has given his finding to the inquiry. I think that was the base of the report that has come out. Let's allow the process of inquiry to complete its course, and then we can announce the finding later at an appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, I'm asking me to talk about long 4+10 minutes. Come to have finish. You may now go business today. Minister for Lands and Mr. Clark.
Minister for Lands and Peaceful Planning.
Mr. Clerk? Mr. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I present the Strata Title Management Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk?
For an act to unify the law relating to the management of the strata titles and unit plans and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention first to inform the Parliament about the Strata Bill titles and then introduce the 3 Strata Bill title bills and the bills for the 6 accompanying consequential amendments to be passed by Parliament into law for the benefit of our country. The Department of Lands and Physical Planning has progressed on the policy, administrative process and the legislation of these sets of Parliament of bills over the last 3 years. Mr. Speaker, composition of the Strata Title legislation constitutes 3 sets of laws. 1, Strata Title Act 2022 creates the individual and common property titles. 2, Land Registration Amendment Act 2022 provides for the registration of the individual and common property titles. And 3, the Strata Title Management Act 2022 provides for the management of the strata title property through an owners corporation or so-called body corp. Consequential amendments were done to the following 6 existing laws. 1, the Land Act of 1996. 2, the Physical Planning Act of 1989. 3, the Survey Act of 1969. 4, the Survey Coordination Act of 1969. 5, the Valuation Act of 1967. And 6, the Building Act of 1971. Mr. Speaker, the STL will provide for the administration of units, apartments and townhouses in Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea since independence has never had STLs. However, despite the absence of STL, the country has witnessed in urban centers like Port Moresby, Lae, Mount Hagen, Goroka, Madang, and so forth, rapid growth in high-density housing development constituting townhouses and so forth. The STL is intended to fill this void and facilitate the orderly development of townhouses, apartments and units in Papua New Guinea. Strata titling will allow the registering of individual titles on subdivided units and flats of high-rise multi-story apartment buildings and townhouses. At present, transactions of units, apartments and townhouses are being facilitated through company structures. Thus, sometimes government misses out on revenue. Unfortunately, this restricts dealings on individual units, apartments and townhouses without considering the overall company. The STL will address these issues so that transactions can be undertaken on individual units, apartments and townhouses. Furthermore, provision had been made to allow for the development of gated communities within an appropriately structured strata title scheme and body corp. Mr. Speaker, before I table the bills to the National Parliament for enactment into law, I want to state that the STL bills and the bills for the accompanying consequential amendments currently presented to this Honourable House are important for nation building and addressing issues such as housing affordability, employment creation, and generating investment options. It also addresses some of things like revenue raising for our country, which currently we do not have taxes. We use subleases on a lot of these very important things, and also puts us on a standing and on a par with other
modern countries equivalent to New Zealand, Australia, and a few other places. This strata titling system has been in place with Fiji and Vanuatu, some of our smaller neighbors. With these brief remarks, I commend the STL bills and the bills for the consequential amendments to the National Parliament.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
A bill for an act to unify the law relating to the management of strata titles and unit plans and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. In accordance with constitutional requirements, this bill must be passed by an absolute majority of 56 members. Clerk, please ring the bells. Attendants, close the doors. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Would those in favor please stand? Those against, please stand. The result of the vote, yes, the ayes 83 and the noes 0. Mr. Minister, congratulations, you have the support of the House. Mr. Clerk.
A bill for an act to unify the law relating to the management of strata titles and unit plans and for related purposes.
Speaker, I present the Strata Bill title 2022.
Clerk.
Notice number 217, Minister for Lands and Fiscal Planning.
Mr. Minister.
The same one. The same one. Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Start again. My apologies. Mr. Speaker, I present the Strata Bill title 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
A bill for an act to provide for the registration of strata titles and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the Strata Title Act 2022. The Strata Title Act 2022 is a principal legislation for the strata title laws. The Strata Title Act 2022 creates the individual and common property titles and provides a core structure for a strata scheme. The Strata Title Act 2022 is organized into 7 parts. Part 1, preliminary providing for constitutional compliance. Part 2, key concepts, provides for the definitions of the key concepts for the Strata Title Act 2022. Part 3 provides for the strata title application process. It has 5 divisions and 32 sections and provides a foundational structure for developing a strata title scheme by providing for the preparation of the application, creation, and registration of strata survey plans, strata title asset registration, development of the strata plan, and the endorsement, approval of strata title plan. Part 4, registration of the strata plan, covers the strata plan registration process. It has 2 divisions covering subdivision, unit leases, and common property leases and easements. Part 5 provides for the amendment of the strata plans. It provides for the amendment of schedule of units, entitlements, minor boundary changes, and building and drawing schemes. Part 6 provides for the cancellation of strata plans. It has 3 divisions and provides for the authority for cancellation, the cancellation order, and the effect of the cancellation. Part 7 provides for the grant of further leases and expiring and termination of unit leases. It has 2 divisions and provides for grant of further leases, expiring, and forfeiture of unit leases, which can be dealt with individually. Mr. Speaker, I commend the Strata Title Bill 2022 to the House to be passed into law.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
A bill for a net to provide for the registration of strata titles and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the 3rd reading forthwith.
Leave granted. Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a 3rd time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a 3rd time. In accordance with constitutional requirements, this bill must be passed by an absolute majority of 56 members. Attendants, Mr. Clerk, please ring the bells. Attendant, please open the door. Tenants, close the door. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor, please stand. The results of the vote, the ayes 86 and the noes 0. Mr. Clerk.
A bill for an act to provide for the registration of strata titles and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 318, Minister for Lands and Fiscal Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Land Registration Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
A bill for an act to amend the Land Registration Act, Chapter 191, to make provisions for registration of strata plans and unit titles issued under the Strata Bill 2022 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill is now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the Strata Title Registration Amendment Bill 2022. The Strata Title Registration Amendment Bill 2022 introduces a new part, Part 4A, Strata Plans, to the Land Registration Amendment Act 1982, which provides for the registration of the individual and common property titles. The Strata Title Registration Amendment Bill 2022, Part 4A, Strata Plans, is organized into 7 divisions. 41A and B provides for definitions and applications respectively. Division 1 provides for the registration of strata plans. Division 2 provides for the registration of interests declared by owners, corporations on easements and the extinguishment of easements. Division 3 provides owners, corporation changes and charges. Division 4 provides for cancellation and amendment of strata plans. Division 5 provides for reissue of strata plans. Division 6 provides for forfeiture and expiry of leases. Division 7 is miscellaneous, providing for changes of address for services, amendment to rules, appointment of an administrator, registration, withdrawal of strata plan, trust, and delivery of register of title, certificate of title. Mr. Speaker, I commend the Strata Title Registration Amendment Bill 2022 to the House to be passed into law.
Honorable Governor.
I ask that the matter be debated, and I would like to debate this matter.
You may debate.
Thank you. Firstly, congratulations to the Minister for Lands. He has been an outstanding minister, working hard in a very important ministry. Papua New Guinea is very fortunate in that we Papua New Guineans are possibly the only people in the world, or one of the very few groups of people in the world, that own our own land. And we're very fortunate also in this regards because that land provides us the security and comfort to know that despite the difficulties and challenges that the world may face, we are fortunate enough to go home, plant our garden, build our house, and take care of ourselves and our families. This is a very vital, important resource. And so therefore every effort needs to be undertaken to protect this resource. And just in addition to what the Minister is doing, I just want to make a few comments or some suggestions to improve this effort. Because we keep hearing about land grabbing taking place where significant portions of land owned by the state as well as traditional landowners are being stolen by various characters, organizations, individuals, etc. Oftentimes we are blaming foreigners for doing this, but I can tell you that most of the theft has probably been undertaken by we Papua New Guineans ourselves. Minister, your department would need to become a very robust organization where the people that work in that organization must be of the highest caliber. And to get that type of robustness in place, you would need to ensure that you conduct a restructure for this purpose, to ensure that you have the capacity to be able to pay and take care of the welfare of the officers of that organization in such a way that they are absolutely loyal to that organization and to this country. Your organization does not have an investigations and prosecutions capacity, for instance. So it cannot investigate allegations of impropriety that are brought to that office for the theft of land or misuse or abuse of land by any organization or individual. That capacity needs to be developed. You must have the ability to investigate and prosecute allegations like this. You also need the capacity to have standards and internal investigations within the organization developed so that you can also investigate allegations of impropriety against your own officers. Many of these actions, the theft of land, is undertaken by corrupt officers within that organization. There are many good officers within that organization, but the few that are corrupt are moving around this country selling land as if there's no tomorrow. In this particular law, for instance, I can tell you, Minister, that there are already a number of organizations that are now putting together land for gated communities, land that they have acquired unlawfully through fraudulent means. And this was allowed to happen because you have such officers in your organization. And much is known about this, but nothing is done about it because you don't have that capacity. So, Minister, in line with all the good work, the reforms that you are undertaking in your ministry, I would suggest that you carry out a restructure of that organization and develop that capacity. And when you carry out the restructure of that organization, you must also ensure that the staff that are employed are of the highest caliber, qualification, and are remunerated well enough so that they are absolutely loyal to Papua New Guinea and that department and the protection of land in our country. We also need laws or policies to look at traditional land and how we manage traditional land. How do we identify genuine landowners? Who are those who have land user rights but are not genuine owners? How do we demarcate land so that we can use it for business purposes, investment purposes, so that we can use it as security? All of this has to be put together in such a way that our people are not marginalized but are able to use the opportunities of development and benefit from the land that they have. And to the government itself, I would say that we need to look seriously at this department in terms of the funding that it receives and also the capacity that it has to generate its own income and how it should retain a portion of that income so that it can continue its operations effectively, efficiently, with the intention of protecting PNG interest 247-365. I want to just make another point here, Mr. Speaker, that was raised by my colleague Governor for East New Britain, where we have a number of land that is actually state land, defined as plantations under leaseback arrangements that were entered into in the 1970s and 60s. These arrangements have now lapsed. These plantations or these portions of land are now state land but are being stolen under very eyes by unscrupulous transnational criminal organizations claiming to be developers, claiming to be investors. I must clarify that there are a number of genuine investors in this country. Yes, we all know this. This is not about them. Those who are complying, those who are following our laws, those who respect us and who are genuinely involved in the development of our nation. I'm not talking about these characters. They are welcome. I'm talking about the insidious transnational criminal types who don't pay their taxes, who breach our laws, who flaunt our laws, who are willing to bribe, who are willing to connect with the few public servants who are organized and operating in our own sectors, in our own civil service, for instance, and are willing to sell this country out. This is happening throughout Papua New Guinea. It's not only happening in East New Britain as highlighted by the governor for East New Britain, it's happening in my province as well, and I am sure it is happening in many other provinces. I'm speaking particularly of a particular area of land in my province, which was also a plantation, where the titles were somehow obtained unlawfully from the church that owned that land, or that at least that land, and were then given or somehow found its way into the hands of these unscrupulous criminals. Minister, many times I have submitted reports to relevant agencies. In fact, yesterday we heard from the Minister for Environment where I had submitted a report, and in fact it's in relation to this type of situation. The minister issued a stop work notice and fined the company, but then beyond that nothing is happening. We can't just stop there. We must prosecute. We must take them to task. We must recognize that their presence in this country is not needed, and that we must find a way to evict them and remove them from this country. Why do we keep entertaining this type of people? Are we not a country? Don't we have a responsibility to protect our people? This type of people are operating throughout this country at will and whim, as if you, Mr. Speaker, or any of us here would be able to go to Malaysia or Singapore or China and do this. They won't let you. The moment they recognize that you are in the process of doing something like this, they will put you in jail straight away. They will not even give you one biscuit or one kolwara or by organizing deportation papers for you. Even some of the time all by caning you. And then all by rousing you hurry up through, and they'll ban you and blacklist you. You are never allowed to go back to those countries. But here, you miss embrace them all, we welcome them, we even knight them, and then we do business with them. My goodness. Country here. We are supposed to be protecting our land, our people, our future, our opportunities, but we're not doing that in many instances. So for instance, yesterday we had a classic example of that, where the minister said, no, I find them, but it's a responsibility of the forestry ministry. No, it's all our responsibilities. You go and you check your books and you'll find that there are powers that you have that will allow you to prosecute this organization. For instance, this should be done by all ministries. We should not be passing the buck here or there. We should take responsibility. Especially when it comes to land. There's no new land been created, except when tectonic plates move every thousands of years and there's a small volcano under our sea and suddenly an island emerges. But that takes thousands of years. Right now, what land we have is limited. Limited and precious. We ought to be doing everything possible to protect this land, each and every one of us here. And if we identify those who are betraying our country and our people by insidiously moving around and connecting with this type of characters, these transnational criminals, and trying to pilfer our land or steal this land, then we should lock them out, jail them, prosecute them as well. We may not be able to deport them, but we can at least do that to them. But those who are foreigners, we should be able to cancel their visas, cancel their work employment documentation, cancel their anything else that allows them to be here, and remove them, evict them from this country. We must embrace genuine investors gladly, process their business, help them invest, accommodate them. But those who are coming in here for insidious, illegal purposes, criminal purposes, we should not entertain them. Minister, you must develop that capacity within your ministry. Restructure your organization and put together a unit that can investigate and prosecute this type of characters. We are very fortunate. One of the reasons why our people are not rioting in the streets whenever there's something major, wrong, illegal, of concern in this country is because of the fact that they have land. And with that land, they're able to take care of themselves. It is far better than any social security system in the world. And we have it here. We should be grateful for this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Land Registration Act, Chapter 191, to make provision for the registration of strata plans and unit titles issued under the Strata Bill 2022 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Land Registration Act, Chapter 191, to make provision for the registration of strata plans and any titles issued under the Strata Bill 2022 and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 319, Minister for Lands and Physical Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Building Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Building Act 1971 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make a speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the consequential amendment to the Principal Act, being the Building Act 1971. The following amendments are made to Section 1, is amended by inserting definitions that cater for the strata title development into different classes, A and B, and stage development, allowing for the approval for the development to be in stages. And Section 4 is amended to provide for all buildings in a strata development lease issued under the Land Act 1996 are subject to the Strata Title Act 2022. And where there is an inconsistency between this Act and the Strata Title Act 2022, the Strata Title Act 2022 prevails. Mr. Speaker, I commend the consequential amendment to the Building Act 1971 to the House to be passed into law.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Building Act 1971 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Building Act 1971 and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 320, Minister for Lands and Physical Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Land Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Land Act 1996 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the consequential amendment to the Land Act 1996. The consequential amendment is made to the Principal Act, being the Land Act 1996, by inserting a division in Part X after Division 10. The new Division 11 provides for a new set of leases called the Strata Development Leases with the following key features. The Strata Development Lease is to be granted on land or buildings in physical planning areas suitable for subdivision. A Strata Development Lease can only be granted if it meets the zoning requirements under the Physical Planning Act 1989. The Strata Development Lease will go into dormancy upon the registration of a strata plan and the issuance of unit titles and common area titles. And all applications for Strata Development Lease must be accompanied by a sketch plan of the infrastructure and the proposed strata development. Mr. Speaker, I commend the consequential amendment to the Land Act 1996 to the House to be passed into law.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Land Act 1996 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Land Act 1996 and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 321, Minister for Lands and Physical Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Physical Planning Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Physical Planning Act 1989 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the consequential amendment to the Principal Act, being the Physical Planning Act 1989. The following amendments are made to the Principal Act. Section 3 of the Principal Act is amended by repealing the definition of subdivision and replacing it with the following definition, which provides for subdivision of an area of land or the vertical subdivision of buildings into two or more parts for purposes that include transfer, partition, sale, gift, lease, mortgage, or any other purpose. And Part 7 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting a new section after Section 72, being 72A, which provides for new definition of density zone to provide for the development of strata title schemes. Mr. Speaker, I commend the consequential amendment to the Land Act 1996 to the House to be passed into law.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Physical Planning Act 1989 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
Honourable Member for Abau.
Just a few comments, and firstly, high commendations to the Honourable Minister for Lands and Fiscal Planning for introducing this very important bill and also the consequential amendments. As they say, Mr. Speaker, the devil is in the detail. And so, whilst the Minister was going through the routine, I had a chance to go through some of the details in the
bill, particularly the principal bill, and therefore the consequential amendments that are being presented to the Honorable House, the Strata Management Bill. I was wondering, Mr. Speaker, because in my short, brief reading of this important bill, I was just wondering about the administration of this particular bill. For example, in one section of the bill, which is section 18, on the subtitle Reasonable Rent in Strata Title Applications, it talks about, and it reads like this, Mr. Speaker. If the department considers that the rent proposed in a strata title application to be reserved for lease of one or more units is not reasonable in the circumstances, the departmental head must determine what rent is reasonable for the relevant unit or units. And I'm wondering, is that the power that the departmental head should be given in terms of what rent rate should be paid to that unit? Mr. Speaker. And so this bill is giving a lot of power to one single citizen called the Secretary for Lands and Fiscal Planning, and is making decisions which I believe is not part of his authority. For example, in this particular section, it says the departmental head will determine what is the right rate that should apply if the departmental head believes, as per this section, that it is not reasonable. And so I was saying, is this bill giving powers to the departmental head, or should there be, as we normally have, a board like the Land Board, the Fiscal Planning Board? So who's going to administer and oversee? The Honorable Governor was talking about the issues of how we can better monitor the issues in Lands Department for a long time. For example, inspections and ensuring that compliance is done with the laws. The second, for example, as I said, the devil is in the detail. If you turn the page to, on the principal bill, page 12, it talks about a lot of requirements. Lot of requirements if you apply for a title of one of these units under this bill. For example, just going to section 23, it requires the persons to go and get a plan, up-to-date plan from the Surveyor General.
Honorable, sorry, Honorable.
I'm just raising the issues, but the point, Mr. Speaker, I'm making is a lot of awareness really has to be made on this very complex law as I read the details. It's quite complicated, and therefore the department has to organize itself and properly educate and inform the country on how to administer this law. And I've just pointed out one or two issues in the details. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is still the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, sorry, be read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading. A bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Planning Act 1989 and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 322, Minister for Lands and Physical Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Survey Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Survey Act 1969 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the consequential amendment to the Principal Act being the Survey Act 1969. The following amendments are made to Section 8 by inserting a new subsection after subsection 7 as follows. Subsection 8 for the Survey General to create a registry within the Central Planning Office for the deposition of survey plans for lands and buildings where strata development schemes are to be registered and kept. Mr. Speaker, I commend the consequential amendments to the Survey Act 1969 to the House to be passed into law.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Survey Act 1969 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Honourable Governor.
No, sorry.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
Honourable Governor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. May just contribute legally debate as all. Long Platumas. Firstly, I want to commend the Minister for bringing this Strata Title law to come to Parliament and all the consequential amendment. It's a bit long, but it's important that we all support the Minister and get these Strata laws in place, because it will help all of us, especially in the urban areas like Port Moresby. Maybe I'm ground is short. Happening like come inside the city, they want to bring their own standalone house long. Plus, Bloyumbi come to city na ground short. So this type of title enables our people to start thinking about and getting used to living in apartment blocks. You must start to come to terms with this reality that you're not walking house where you're alone. Stand alone, you start the city or town. You're not thinking of some, you start the place kanakana, place tumuna bluyumina, ground and plantino. Most be ground is short. So we are starting to approve the fiscal planning, buildings going up, because sky am not a limit blongen. Building must go up. You must encourage developers. You study got ground to inside the city to start to invest or get into joint ventures to build high-rise apartments. This will facilitate a growing city. Mostly, for example, you may go up 1 million now. Maybe in 5 years' time, or 10 years' time, you may go 2 million. Line go, how will they live in the city? If honorable city too grow too, then people can start to live in these other cities. It got become major hub, business hub, commercial hub, entertainment, recreation, everything. Then it can ease the pressure on some urban centers like Port Moresby. But otherwise, in Port Moresby, you're going to place now, and close to now, you may go to border now, and finish now. So it's timely, Minister, bring him this Strata Title come. You may organize support him, so it's good. Maybe he got some teething problem long in. I think you may just accept him or some sepukatemu member about erasing. It's probably valid, but you may allow him this Principal Act to be passed, so behind time you may can amend him or adjust him, because nubla something. maybe the Department of Lands, they have not thought of all the scenarios. Minister, thinking of all the scenarios that could happen. Of course, there will be problem. So beyond time, you can amend him. But this law, we have been waiting for it for a long time. All the developers, they are coming up with kind way to sell the apartment blocks, all by selling flats or all by selling money or all working lease agreement. Or they are, doing illegal practice too. And Lands Department is not charging them land rates or flat rates or whatever rates, because then there is no law in existence. Now that we are passing this law, you can buy a flat, a unit. You don't have to buy the entire property, which is good. It allows our people they can afford to buy a flat. They just buy that flats rather than the entire property. So commendation, Igolo Minister. Law City, and our goal in the city is to have a planned city. We play like Penisim settlement. I mean, hard task, not easy. We need a lot of money, but hard looks money, but we are starting to, end the settlement. So this is good for all of us. I think it's good for the urban areas. We should just support it, and I must and thank Minister once again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading. A bill for an act to amend the Survey Act 1969 and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 323, Minister for Lands and Physical Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Survey Coordination Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Survey Coordination Act 1967 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make a speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the consequential amendment to the Principal Act, being the Survey Coordination Act 1967. The following amendments are made to Section 8 by inserting a new subsection after Section 7 as follows. Subsection 8, for the Surveyor General to create a registry within the Central Plan Office for the deposition of survey plans for land and buildings where strata development schemes are to be registered and kept. Mr. Speaker, I commend the consequential amendment to the Survey Coordination Act 1967 to the House to be passed into law.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Survey Coordination Act 1967 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Survey Coordination Act 1967 and for related purposes.
Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 324, Minister for Lands and Physical Planning.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Valuation Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Valuation Act 1967 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to inform Parliament about the consequential amendment to the Principal Act, being the Valuation Act 1967. The following amendments are made to Section 1 of the Principal Act, the Interpretation section, by repealing and inserting a broader definition of owner to include the registered proprietor of the unit or the owner's corporation in relation to the strata title, and by inserting a new subsection after the definition of the valuer general to include reference to buildings under the strata title scheme. Mr. Speaker, I commend the consequential amendment to the Valuation Act 1967 to the House to be passed into law.
Mr. Prime Minister.
I wish to firstly appreciate the work of the Lands Minister. This is a law that is being brought in to modernize the way we do business and transact in as far as land and housing in our country. This is a response to our country's need for housing also, and the Minister has worked very hard over this one in the sunset of this term of Parliament to see a law that is brought in to modernize the way we deal with housing land in our country. Lest we forget, Mr. Speaker, we only have 3% of the entire land, the 462,000 square kilometers of land we have in our country. Under 3% is state-owned. And in the 3%, developers and leaseholders will develop the land. When you look at the ever-increasing demand for house, and demand for house that will be home, in fact, for Papua New Guineans, and the governor for NCD just made a passing reference to the need for we asked to shift from just having one house on a block of land to owning homes in apartments that you own and entitled to. This law gives solution to what, in my view, is a scarcity of land, especially state land, and a need to offer cheaper housing solutions to our people in a manner in which it's mass produced. Minister has done well to bring this law in, the principal law as well as the consequential amendments. I want to also thank members of Parliament, especially on the opposite, who have realized the value for this bill. We take note of some of the suggestions that has been offered, suggestions from the member for Abao as well as others who've raised where we could improve on. Mr. Speaker, you would note that this Parliament, especially on this side of the term in the last 2.5 years, when we brought in many good laws that has been outstanding for so long. This law has been first talked about 20 years ago, but has been outstanding for so long. It may seem as if an ordinary act of Parliament be passing today that deals with the land, but Mr. Speaker, far from it. It has a direct value on the economy. There's a direct value on the economy. If one person who owns a piece of real estate in an urban area decides to build up a 20-floor house, 20-floor building, there in the 20th floor you easily will find over 60, 70 units. Those units can now be given individual title out. You don't need to own a piece of land to own title to an apartment that you can call as home. So it is a law in an effort to modernize some of the legacy issues we carry through. The Lands Minister has seen fit to ensure his department is moving in the right direction. And I just want to appreciate both sides of the House for sitting in, giving value to good laws for our country. First thing first, as members of Parliament, we are members of Parliament to pass law that is based on policy. And good laws that is supported by both sides is commended, and I appreciate both sides of the House for giving support to the Lands Minister, who's worked very hard to bring this one in. Hopefully in this process, this will unlock the 3% of land we call state land, and in a planned manner, for those who already have titles, they could build apartments, whether single-floor apartment or double-floor apartments or multiple-floor apartments, and then Papua New Guineans who can be linked to our first home owner program that we have in partnership with BSP, that 4% for a 40-year loan program. That is lending facilities available. Mr. Minister and the Housing Minister can combine in that space. Investors come in, whether domestic investors or large-scale foreign investors at a certain rate of investment. If they come in, we could mass invest in apartments, and these apartments can then be subtitled or titled out to those who want to own homes in apartments rather than owning land and building homes on top. This is a good bill. Thank you, Minister for Lands, for bringing a timely bill, cleaning up a legacy of over 20 or 30 years. In case, Mr. Speaker, you do not know, Fiji, a smaller economy, smaller nation than ours, has strata title law. Vanuatu, a smaller economy of only 200,000 to 300,000 people, with only Port Vila and I think Port Santos. They have strata title. We have had no strata title for so long, and we only have 3% of state land. This small state land, we have investors. Firstly, domestic investors can now go into building multiple floor buildings or apartments that could be now given titles to the owners of these apartments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend this last consequential amendment to the House. Let's support the minister and get this good bill functional.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Valuation Act 1967 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Aye. Leave granted, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Minister, you would want to say something?
Mr. Speaker, can I make a closing remark, please?
I will allow you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Lands Department, I'd like to thank both sides of the House for support on this very, very important bill. Yes, I acknowledge the remarks made by Dr. Honorable Pukatemu on some teething issues. And yes, like everything else, this is a work in progress that we will try to look at and amend when necessary to ensure that we have the best working platform possible. I also take note of the Governor Jufa's comments, and yes, we admit, I'm always the first person to admit that we have issues at Lands, but in the last 2 years we have worked on numerous reforms to ensure that the problems are fixed and sorted out. We have a lot more to do. It takes a lot of patience to work in a highly technical department like Lands. And the issues within Lands that we need to rectify, and subsequently we'll be bringing more amendments to ensure that the laws are for us and our people. It is an outdated law that we've inherited, and a lot of these issues and amendments will be brought to Parliament, if not in my term, and in subsequent ministers' term. And I'd like to also say thank you to the hardworking staff, the Secretary and the staff of the Lands Department for putting this together, including our good National Advisor, Dr. Charles Yala, who's helped us in putting all these technical details together. I commend them on that. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the whole House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Valuation Act 1967 and for related purposes.
Well done, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Civil Aviation.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave of Parliament to move a motion without notice.
Is leave granted?
Aye.
Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that so much of the standing orders be suspended as would prevent Minister for Treasury to present Income Tax Amended Bill 2022 to be called on forthwith.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Income Tax Amendment Bill 2022, Minister for Treasury.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Income Tax Act 1959.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to present to Parliament amendments to the Income Tax Act of 1959. These amendments deal with proposed changes to the market concentration levy passed by this Parliament as a $285 million revenue-raising measure in the 2022 budget. Mr. Speaker, the role of government is hard. It is especially difficult when one inherits the worst economic legacy in our country's history. A once-in-a-century global pandemic made it all the more challenging. And now we have the worst war breaking out in Europe since World War II, which is driving prices up and growth down around the globe. Tough times to be a government, tougher times to be a treasurer, but we're up to the challenges. Mr. Speaker, good government involves careful balances and judgments in these most difficult of times. We need to cut the budget deficit. This involves growing the economy to generate revenue, raising revenue more fairly, and spending more wisely. Mr. Speaker, on the one hand, everyone agrees that we need to raise more revenue to help reduce our budget's deficit. On the other hand, no one wants to pay more taxes. The changes we are introducing today reflect that careful balance. We are looking at increasing taxes on those parts of the economy that are super profitable, in particular on the banking and the telecommunication areas, and especially those firms that benefit most from this high level of profitability. At the same time, we have decided to cut taxes to reduce the temporary cost of living pressures from families flowing from the tragic Ukraine-Russian war. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased that Cabinet has already agreed in principle to remove temporarily the 10% GST on key selected basic items vital for most of our households. And I thank the Prime Minister for his announcements this morning. The Marape Basil government is on the front foot dealing with increased cost of living pressures flowing from this Ukraine-Russian war. Real action to reduce cost of living pressures. The proposed reductions includes removing GST on all fuels, whether petrol, diesel, kerosene or Zoom. Sanitary pads and tampons will have no GST, respecting the importance of women's hygiene products. There will be no GST on rice, biscuits, cooking oils, oxen palm, tin fish, noodles, flour, sugar, coffee, tea, and even looking after our babies. No GST on diapers. The GST moving to zero will save some 10% of the cost of all of these products. This is a significant saving for families. So what used to be or used to cost 5 kina will now cost 4 kina 55 toya. What used to cost 20 kina will now cost 18 kina 20 toya. It is measured, it is targeted, it will help with the cost of living throughout our country. We are a responsible government, so we are making these changes in line with the expected temporary nature of the Ukraine-Russian war. This means the reduction in GST will also be temporary, with a view to a maximum of 6 months. The reductions will be paid for in full by the increased revenues from Kumul petroleum dividends and minerals and petroleum tax collections. This makes the cuts entirely consistent with our 2022 budget and work on our budget repair. We are going into consultations with businesses and partners to make sure that all of the implementation details are in place and are workable. We expect to introduce the GST legislative changes when Parliament reconvenes on April next month. Mr. Speaker, we also know that many businesses in PNG have been doing it tough, very tough, especially with the global travel restrictions, higher freight costs and closed international borders. We are pleased that the cuts in GST on all fuel products will help many businesses, especially those in the transport sector. At the same time, we have decided on tax increases for those firms that had the greatest capacity to pay. This is about fairness. This is about budget repair. This is about the careful judgments of a sovereign government in these most extraordinary of times of COVID-19 and the Ukraine-Russia war. We have had discussions with the 3 major companies likely affected by the proposed new tax: BSP, Digicel and Telstra. Key ministers and regulators have also been consulted. As a result of these discussions, the amendments being moved today have the following implications. Firstly, we are looking at removing an ongoing tax on the telecommunications sector on the assumption that the sale of Digicel Pacific to Telstra proceeds. Throughout our discussions with Telstra, they have agreed that we will raise more than the original levy of 95 million kina through additional taxes worth at least 41 million kina each year, as well as a major infrastructure investment program, including an additional 115 towers throughout Papua New Guinea. Second, we are imposing a fair tax in recognition of the high historic levels of overall profitability from Digicel Pacific after allowing for both recurrent and capital profits. The tax being imposed of 350 million kina is a judgment based on multiple factors. It is less than half of the net present value of the ongoing levy that we initially proposed. It is less than any rate of capital gains tax that we have under consideration in drafts of a revised Income Tax Act. It notes the technically legal franchise fees that have been paid and the wider international debate about such fees. It would keep the rate of return from the original investment high enough to encourage future foreign direct investment in our country. Third, we are deferring the payment of 190 million kina in tax on the banking sector to a single payment, not due until 30th of September this year. We want to make it clear, though, that we consider it is fair for the banking sector to pay more. And by far the biggest winner is BSP, due to its high level of market concentration. Fourth, we are changing the name to indicate the focus is an additional tax on highly profitable companies that dominate the highly profitable banking and telecommunication sectors. It is being called the additional company tax, indicating the view of super recurrent and capital profits being earned in certain sectors. Thank you to all of those that have contributed to the consultation process. Sincerely, we know that some will not like the outcomes, but this is a sovereign government acting in the interests of all peoples of Papua New Guinea in this critical work of budget repair in these most extraordinary and difficult of times. Mr. Speaker, I commend the bill to the Parliament.
The Honourable Member for Esala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Esala is often forgotten, so I'm happy that you're able to memorize Esala. But this is one such time when, Mr. Speaker, in the national interest, we need to give support to the Honourable Treasurer, especially in view of the pain and suffering that is out there amongst our people. Mr. Speaker, the cost of living right now has become a crisis. It is indeed a crisis. And every effort must be made by leaders, especially this Parliament, to do what we can to alleviate, to help, whilst at the same time, as the Honourable Leader, the Treasurer, has indicated, managing the budget. Mr. Speaker, it is timely to note from this side of the House, with support, the consultation process that has occurred in respect to two important sectors of the economy, in this case the
telecommunication space and the banking space. The handset will show that when the debate, during the debate in relation to the budget, the main concern that was raised from this side was the lack of consultation and the implication that imposing an unannounced a surprising tax like that would have on the broader economy, and especially the sectors that are making profit. In other words, it is in our national interest that we encourage sectors or players, participants in our economy in those sectors, like in the banking space, to progress. And so it is for that reason that I stand to support the effort made to consult and to adjust this aspect of the budget. And it is encouraging to note that the reduction in GST is being indicated. I would venture to say that more would be done, more should be done, especially for rural communities where the suffering is increased by virtue of the fact that there's more costs involved in getting goods and services to those island communities or remote highlands communities. Perhaps there could be a time, Mr. Speaker, through you, when an analysis can be done to assist the Treasurer in making determination, in such determinations, so that a more focused effort is made to identify such goods and services that I'm referring to. Mr. Speaker, I would also want to suggest that similar consultation be had with the forestry sector, with the mining and petroleum sector, so that we do not ignore the fact that they may be making profits that are not being targeted by this newly introduced taxation policy that we are now calling different names, including the super tax or super profits tax, and now renamed. Mr. Speaker, for those reasons, I stand to support this effort and also to lend and offer the suggestions that I've made. Thank you.
Honorable Governor for Pacific.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to commend the Treasurer and to point out that there was significant discussion within government caucus on bringing in this relief to our people. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that it is really good to have a Prime Minister and a Treasurer that listen to the concerns of the leaders of this House. So I wanted to make that point, Mr. Speaker, because many times we see the concerns of our people and we try to bring it to those who are in positions that can make a difference. And many times we end up bashing our heads against deaf ears and brick walls. And so whilst these changes are going to help our people, the fact of the matter is that we need to do more in terms of publicity in informing our people about the full implications of what could happen if the war between the Russians and the Ukrainians continue, Mr. Speaker. The price of flour and the price of rice will continue to increase for a very simple reason. These two crops grown around the world depend highly on fertilizer. And these two countries that are currently involved in the war are the two biggest producers of fertilizer. Even China buys fertilizer from them, and all the Asian countries that produce rice. Australia also buys fertilizer from them for the production of wheat. So our people need to know that it's not going to get better simply because you are given a 10% relief on GST, Mr. Speaker.
Messaging.
Our people need to know these facts. If 40% of the world's fuel that Russia produces does not enter the world market, then obviously the price of fuel is going to continue to increase. That will then feed onto every other segment of society, Mr. Speaker. And because of the lack of understanding of the majority of our people, the first instance would be to blame the government, because that's what we always do. And perhaps the government is responsible for a lot of things going wrong and not working well. But beyond that, the full impact of COVID-19, whilst we are still trying to recover from it after 2 years of downturn in the global economy, is now actually compounded by the European war that's going on. And whilst we hope it will subside in the next 6 months, there's no indication that it will. We are actually guessing. So one of the things we should do, Mr. Speaker, is that we should go back and look at our founding principles that came out in 1973, particularly the 8-point plan. There is talk in there about communities being self-sustaining, about being self-reliant. And one of the things that ECPIC did, Mr. Speaker, when we were first hit with COVID, was to encourage our people to grow more local food and to make that available in the markets. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased with my members of parliament that we all got together and agreed, and we built lots of markets in ECPIC, Mr. Speaker, because we wanted to provide an avenue so once our sweet potato and our yams and taro and everything else and kumu, when the production increased, the mothers would have a marketplace to sell it. And we did. We now have markets all over the CIPIC. And we are still encouraging our people to grow more local food. And we are encouraging our people to eat less rice and to eat less flour, Mr. Speaker. And that's something I think we need to do across the country. Whilst we are interested in rice and flour, which is very useful in towns and cities, we really need to encourage our people to go back to the self-reliant lifestyle pre-independence. We must do that. Our people must eat more taro, more sweet potato, more cassava, these foods that are nutrient-rich, not the nutrient-deficient food that is grown using fertilizer, which is highly fertilizer-dependent, Mr. Speaker. And this is why those costs are going to flow through to our communities if we do not inform them, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's important that the health department and others, agriculture perhaps even, to start talking to our people to make sure that we fix our own internal supply chains so that food from the highlands, for example, is more readily available in some of our towns and cities. And that every single province is looking at making local production available in the local market. Because, Mr. Speaker, we are also seeing the effect of COVID-19 on shipping. The cost to move one single container has tripled in the last 2 years. So these things are not going to stop, and they're not going to change tomorrow. We are still seeing a backlog of containers sitting in other countries that are not going back to China. And these costs are being passed to our exporters, and they are passed to our importers as well. One of the reasons why a lot of our goods are not arriving on time is because of a lack of containers available worldwide. So, Mr. Speaker, there's something where affecting prices, where affecting people, blah, blah, blah. We need to inform our people so that they better understand why these things are happening. And that whilst the 10% removal of the GST, that will be a benefit, it's not going to be a huge benefit if the war between Russia and Ukraine continues for more than 6 months. The prices will continue to increase, and then that will take away this impact of the removal of GST. We must be aware of that. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, when the super tax was brought in on the banks, I was one of those that was against it. But then I noticed something that I thought was quite peculiar. In the last 2 years, with the global pandemic, the worldwide economy was depressed. Yet if you looked at the banks, they declared profits in excess of $1 billion kina. Now, how were they able to do that while the economy was depressed? How are they able to declare super profits when everyone is thinking that the world economy is depressed? And I think it comes back to what the Treasurer and the Prime Minister in their wisdom have done, which is to go out and borrow soft loans, in fact, interest-free loans, to keep the economy traveling at a high level while using loans to inject into the economy. And that, I think, has a direct influence on the profits of the banks, because they remain the biggest beneficiary. So this idea of balancing who should pay more, I think we need to do more work on it, Mr. Speaker. I think the Treasurer and his team need to come out and communicate more effectively with our people, because for time no good. How na wambla man making profit na narbla nogat? I think that's a key question that we need to see, and I think our people need to see it more than us as leaders, because plenty of time people with interest in those businesses will come out and try to make it look like, well, the government is being unfair. Well, how is the government being unfair when what we are trying to do is to pass that benefit, as we have done today? We are trying to pass that benefit right down to those who are the most vulnerable in our society. Mr. Speaker, wealthy Papua New Guineans will not eat a lot of flour products. Wealthy Papua New Guineans will not eat a lot of rice products. All by go back lo market na, all by buying kumuna, all by buying kaukau na, all by buying taro na, all healthy kaikai lo kaikai. Because if you look at our markets, our healthy vegetables are actually much more expensive than rice and flour. That's why those who are in the low income bracket, they depend on rice and flour. Those who are not, and plus those who are in the villages, they will eat the healthy food. So this dilemma needs to be kind of corrected through our tax processes. We need to figure out a way that if we have to, we push our people away from imported foods, and they must eat more local foods. And I think we need the tax system to help us to achieve that outcome somehow. But the whole of government needs to be brought to bear on this. Because my fear, Mr. Speaker, is this. If the war continues, then we are going to continue to see an increase in prices. Increase in price of fertilizer, increase in the price of fuels, and that will then pass on to the price of food and all the other household items that ordinary Papua New Guineans need. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'd like to commend the Treasurer for listening to the concerns of the government caucus and for implementing what we hope will relieve the pressure of prices on our people. With that, I commend the Treasurer's bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I understand that we have put questions to be put, but there are members who want to debate, so I will entertain the debate. I ask the Honourable Member for Abao.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't be long, but I thank the leadership of the Prime Minister and the Treasurer in bringing this very, very positive and progressive amendment bill. And I stand to support it, but just one or two areas that I wish to make comment on. Firstly, I saw the absence of the Treasurer in condemning the actual war going on between Russia and Ukraine. There has to be a statement in this scenario that we really have to condemn what's going on, and it's a wrong place in this 21st century to have a war anywhere in the world. So any leadership must be called upon to retract what's going on for humanity's sake. That's the first point I wish to make. And iminoken poretlo displa. We are a sovereign nation. I know they're a sovereign nation, but leadership has to express in the clearest way. Second, I couldn't agree more with the Governor for East Sepik's position, but I wish to look at it differently. And first comment is, I would want to remove the no GST on sugar, because not so long ago, the Governor for Gulf raised the issue while we were expressing condolences to one of our leaders who succumbed from diabetes. And so I strongly recommend that this debate, please support me in my suggesting not to remove GST on sugar. Sugar is a bad product in this country. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, us in Papua New Guinea have what we call in the medical term in some particular communities, very low tolerance to sugar. So time you may drink Coke or you may plenty biscuit, put in plenty sugar or tea, we develop diabetes very, very quickly, more than many communities around the world. And so many leaders have developed diabetes, and they are dying from diabetes. And so in this argument, I strongly recommend to this honorable House today to not to accept the recommendation no GST on sugar. And in fact, I would strongly recommend that you have to review looking at increasing prices on any sugar products in this country, particularly canned sugar products, all the lolly waters, all the canned drinks, Coke, Sprite, everything that has to be relooked at seriously, because our genetic predisposition to diabetes is well recognized by the medical fraternity. And I personally have done studies in some of the communities where our sugar intolerance is one of the worst in the world. And so, Honorable Treasurer, if I can ask through my debate, please reconsider no GST for sugar. Second point I wish to raise, Mr. Speaker, is I believe that the telephone, digital, B-Mobile and Telstra coming in, very expensive here. 2 kina, 5 kina, all of you leaders, us leaders, 100 kina flex, and then you buying it every now and then. Have we done a calculation on an average citizen on how much are we spending on B-Mobile and digital every year? And so why don't we relook at that structure? And I note in the recommendation for companies additional tax and targeted at banking as well as communication. But I would strongly suggest that let's allow this benefit in terms of the lower prices in communication, particularly for millions of our people who are using mobile telephones. And I think that really should be looked at. And I know that, for example, you have said that there'll be a X number of towers to be, and that type of relook at it. But I just want to say that the cost of communication is still too high, and NICTA and Treasury will have to sit down and say, how can we reduce further the cost of communication in our country? Because the availability of communication has been proven by the World Bank that the more extent the communication is, it has direct positive impact on the GDP of a country. That's a well-proven fact. So when we brought in digital, the Treasurer then, Honorable Patrick Pruas, did make a statement that there was evidence that the GDP was directly and positively improved. The last point, Mr. Speaker, is we actually have a cabinet-approved, Governor-General signed contract on a major rice-producing program in Kairukuhiri. And the reason why some of us pushed it was because we knew that rice will become and is a major nutrition food. And in the presence of poor nutrition, and surveys have done, particularly children in Papua New Guinea, where the impact of malnutrition in this country, particularly what we call growth stunting, and also its impact on brain development. I think the study showed about 40% of our children are actually malnourished. And that's very, very serious. And so food like banana or cacao or all those things that we are producing, we know that they don't last long. 1 week, nobody bugger up. But the fact is the world, the rice is actually feeding the world. And so we have soil that can produce rice. And I recognize many, many initiatives at different levels, but we must make a decision to become, in this region, a major rice-producing nation. Not only for food security in our country, but also to export rice. Because rice is a very, very important nutrition product. And I strongly recommend the Treasurer and the Prime Minister to look at that particular 7 billion kina rice project that we actually approved in Kairuku district. And that is an opportunity for us during this time to elevate our ability to address our nutritional issues in the country and rice. And we can become a food ball in the Pacific, and I look at rice seriously rather than banana, cacao, taro, etc., because they don't have long storage lifetimes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I will entertain the last debate. Honourable Member for Northern Province, Honourable Governor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to add support to the Treasurer bill and the great efforts that he has undertaken since he has taken up the position of Treasurer. The Treasurer is not just a person who has been speaking and talking a lot, but he's actually been doing a lot of work, so he should be commended for his efforts. He is a very hard-working minister. When you go to his office at various times, he is there working hard, and I just wanted to make that comment about his efforts. My comments in relation to the bill are as follows. One, these efforts must trickle down to consumers, reduce taxes. Oftentimes, we assume that businesses will do that. But while a few will, there are others who will take advantage. They are more concerned about the profit margins that they can make from this situation. And they're not going to transfer those benefits. So what mechanisms have we got in place to ensure that these benefits go to the consumers? Will the prices actually be reduced per unit of product that's going to be sold at supermarkets or shops? How is this going to be translated so that our people who are consumers will benefit? That's a question that I would like the Treasurer to seriously consider. Once upon a time, on a side note, we used to have an organization called the Consumer Affairs Council. This organization apparently belonged to the people of Papua New Guinea, like many organizations and departments that were created for the purpose of serving Papua New Guineans. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, many of these departments don't do that anymore. They have become like mercenary organizations. They serve other interests, not the interests of Papua New Guineans. And so this organization, called the Consumer Affairs Council, that used to be located in Boroko, you could openly see it, very big sign, anybody walking around can see Consumer Affairs Council, and they knew where to go and lodge their reports and complaints about issues that affected them as consumers. If they had shorts or shoes or a bicycle that wasn't functioning that they bought at a particular shop, they would run to Consumer Affairs Council and they would lay their complaints, and Consumer Affairs Council would dispatch its officers immediately and go and hold that organization, that shop, that supermarket to account, and on many occasions would fine them. This was an organization serving Papua New Guineans and PNG interests. Where is that organization today? Well, it was dismantled. It was dismantled and created into an organization that serves corporate interest. We pay for it, we taxpayers, but it doesn't serve Papua New Guineans. Now, does anyone even know where that organization is based? You don't. You don't. The ordinary consumer can't go and lodge his complaint at this organization because they don't even know where it exists or what it does. It's basically serving corporate interests. This is very sad, Mr. Speaker, because this has happened many times to a number of government departments and organizations that were supposedly created to protect PNG interests, but have been converted into mercenary entities. We pay for them, but they serve other masters, not us. Consumer Affairs Council is a classic example. They would be the organization that would work to ensure that this great, wonderful law that the Treasurer has brought would be implemented in such a way that the consumers benefited from this law. Now, another point I want to make, it's about the Internal Revenue Commission, an organization that of late has been doing very well, thanks to the leadership of the current Commissioner General, I might add. Just as another organization that's responsible for collecting revenue, Customs, is also doing very well, again, due to the leadership of the current Commissioner of Customs. I want to thank the Prime Minister and his cabinet for making astute decisions in appointing these two fine patriots to these organizations. But let's look at the IRC. It can do better. Once upon a time, we had a very assertive tax regime. And within that organization, there used to be a division called the Audits Division. And the Audits Division had such a capacity that it could travel around the country and it could carry out audits in real time and issue assessments to defaulting companies, to bad taxpayers, to bad corporate entities that were not behaving as they ought to. And it would collect taxes that were much needed by this country. For some reason, this organization was dismantled in a very clever restructure that took place that was influenced, perhaps by outside interests, perhaps by lobbyists, who knows, but whatever it was, that capacity was diminished, and we put in place a passive tax regime so that taxpayers, especially those big giant corporations, could voluntarily turn up and pay their taxes. Voluntarily. No one would force them. No one would go and check on them. And now that's what they enjoy. And they turn up and pay their taxes when they feel like it. Not when they're supposed to, when they feel like it. And what do? We just sit back and passively accept it. Treasurer, you need to speak to your Commissioner General and you need to conduct a mini restructure and put that capacity of the Audit Division back to where it used to be. And also, while you're at it, you might want to make some changes so that that organization could retain a percentage of its revenue collections so that it could function continuously 24/7, 365, protecting the interests of Papua New Guinea at all times. And while you're at it, you must develop an intelligence capacity within the IRC. When I was working there, I tried my very best to do this, but I got no help from the government at that time. Department of Personal Management was not interested, but you need to develop an intelligence capacity so that you can monitor the economic and financial landscape of this nation and identify the bad taxpayers and go after them, because there are many of them. What we're doing is we are punishing the compliant taxpayers, the good guys. We punish them. We go after them vigorously. The bad taxpayers, they get away with it. They don't pay taxes at all. I can give you many examples in the forestry sector and in the fishery sector and many other sectors as well. These characters don't pay hardly any tax at all. They constantly declare losses all the time, but they're developing buildings and gated infrastructure and whatnot, doing a lot of business, supermarkets and what have you, hotels even, that many of us go and drink coffee all the time. But they apparently are making losses and don't pay taxes. We need to go after those guys. That's got to happen. That must happen. There is also the issue of a lot of foreigners that come in here, and here I would like the Minister for Labour to take note, or the Minister for Border or Migration, whoever is now responsible for this particular area. There are a lot of foreigners that come into this country on the wrong visa. They come in on business visas or tourist visas, but they're actually working here, earning a living in this country and not paying tax. Not paying tax. They don't pay tax. No one's monitoring their activities here. You know, some of them come in here as major transnational criminal organization representatives. And soon enough, they're operating cleverly, right under our noses, and they walk out with not millions, hundreds and millions of kina. Hundreds and millions of kina. They get away with it. Who's monitoring them? Who's forcing them to pay their taxes? Comes back to the IRC. So, Mr. Speaker, these are just my comments that I wanted to make here in relation to the presentation made by our good treasurer here. And again, I want to insist that we must make an effort to do this, to ensure that those benefits trickle to the consumers. I think what we should really consider is a reduction on taxes on fuel, because that's what affects all prices. All prices. Supposedly we're an energy producing nation. We used to produce oil, you know, and gas. Okay, well, why aren't we enjoying the benefits of that? You know, if we just look at reducing taxes on fuels and fuel products, we could make significant, well, we would be able to transfer those benefits to all consumers, whether they're companies or individuals. Just my thoughts, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The question is, the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Income Tax Act 1959.
Honourable members, I have to announce that I have received a message from His Excellency the Governor-General dated 23rd March 2022, recommending the imposition of fees insofar as the bill relates to and provides for such imposition. Minister for Treasury.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Minister for Treasury.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Income Tax Act 1959.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Mr. Clerk.
Notice number 325, Minister for Education, Research, Science, Technology and Sports.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Papua New Guinea Sports Foundation Amendment Bill 2022.
Mr. Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Papua New Guinea Sports Foundation Act 2005.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, the Marabe Basil government has lived up to its promise since taking office in June 2009. This government has championed many reforms in all sectors of our country. The cross-cutting sector of sport has benefited greatly through reforms resulting in the approval of PNG Sports Policy 2020 to 2050. And I congratulate our government for achieving what we have promised. The reforms undertaken in the administrative sector resulting in the amendment to the Public Services Management Amendment Act 2020 on the provisions relating to the retirement age for public servants. The amendments to increase retirement age for public servants to 65 years in order to retain and attract high-performing professionals and management in line with longer life expectancy and the growing demand of the public sector. This has necessitated the need for consequential amendments to be made to the PNG Sports Foundation Act 2005. Necessary consultations have been completed, resulting in concurrence of view to cost amendment. Mr. Speaker, the National Executive Council approved the amendment to the PNG Sports Foundation Amendment Bill 2022 and reads as follows. Number 1, a person who has attained the age of 65 years shall not be appointed or reappointed as Executive Director. Mr. Speaker, I am confident that this amendment will enable the government to retain and attract experienced professionals to manage our institutions and line agencies to achieve service delivery goals driven by the Marabe Basil government. Therefore, on behalf of the Marabe Basil government, I commend all members of both sides of this House on the passing of the PNG Sports Foundation Amendment Bill 2022. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Papua New Guinea Sports Foundation Act 2005.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill now be read a third time.
The question is that the question be now put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Papua New Guinea Sports Foundation Act 2005.
I'll learn, Mr. Minister. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, me thank him. Honourable members of this House, members on government side, opposition side, opposition leader, deputy opposition leader Wanta Mogata, members who are joining in dispelling with a couple of government business were very important for country believe and it's a good feeling to see that we stand together in some issues that we see are very important to this country. So we thank you all members on this side, or members on the opposition side. And Mr. Speaker, we move us in Parliament go 10 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.
Question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Honourable members, Parliament is now adjourned to 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.